This is the Bizgnus podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
It's been flying under the radar for years, but now it's emerging as a different, perhaps more sustainable way of doing business. On this Bizgnus podcast, Roy Whitten, an expert in attitude and its role in human performance, talks about what may be one of the most transformative times in business history. Let's start out, if you don't mind, Roy, by telling our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself, because they may not have seen the earlier interview we did with you.
Well, I've had a delightfully checkered career and have been very fortunate in my education and my mentors. I'll be 73 in a couple of weeks here. And my very first job when I was in college in San Jose, California, was selling Fuller Brush products door to door, which I did for a year. And I was trained badly, selling badly, which is being pushy, persuasive, and just kind of spinning the yarn to get people to buy stuff. Didn't really feel totally comfortable doing it. But then I kind of got the call to go into the parish ministry of the Episcopal Church that I'd grown up in. And part of it was that I was about 20 years old during 1968, the Summer of Love in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the start of the Human Potential Movement, which is where I first ran into the word transformation. And the people that I knew that were involved in that movement, many of them were Episcopal clergymen. It was just this unique thing in history that happened for a period of a few years. And so I thought, why not? So I graduated from college. I went across the country to Virginia to go to seminary in Alexandria, returned to California, and was in the Episcopal parish ministry, I was a transformational agent with a collar on for about 7-8 years. Then for a variety of reasons, I decided I just had enough of that. And I left the parish ministry and soon with another business partner, also kind of an ex-priest, developed a training program for the general public called the Life Training, which I did for the next 20 years. And it went international. We had 22 locations in 4 countries. And over 20 years, I personally trained somewhere around 100,000 people. And the training was all about how do you transform the way that you think and the way that you act so that you can be true to who you really are and live a life that you're proud of while earning a living and feeding your family. So that's what I did for 20 years. Finished that in about 2000, went back took a sabbatical, turned into retirement, went back to university in California in San Francisco, the California Institute of Integral Studies, got my doctorate in a new field called transformative learning and change. So I was able to study academically what I'd been doing for 20, 30 years. Finished up my doctorate, became a consultant to business for a number of years. And then in 2009, teamed up with a man I'd known for 30 years, Mr. Scott Roy, and we developed a sales consultancy called Whitten & Roy Partnership, where we do sales consultancy for socially minded businesses. And that's what I've been doing since 2009. And if I can just get a commercial word in, we've just released our first book, Decision Intelligence Selling, and that's now available on Amazon in all versions. So that's both the commercial and the brief history.
And let's look to the future. Are we done transforming business and society? And what role, perhaps, should business play in any society transformation?
Oh, this is a really, really great question. Not only are we not done, we're kind of just getting going. On August 19th of 2019, the Business Roundtable, which I'm sure you're aware of, which is the 181, I think, CEOs of America's largest corporations. We're talking GE, Apple, Intel, etc. The Business Roundtable, which had started maybe 20 years previously, every year issues recommendations for business. And on August the 19th, August 22nd, 2019, they issued a startling recommendation, which is that short-term profit will no longer be the purpose of all of their businesses. Now, this is kind of heresy according to the gospel of Milton Friedman.
Were they struck down by lightning from Wall Street?
Very interesting. What they were struck down with and raised up by was a movement that has been happening under the surface of most people's awareness, a movement called social entrepreneurship, which goes back to people like Paul Pollock of IDE, International Development Enterprises, where in 1986, he had the idea that we should be selling things to poor people, not just giving it to them in order to relieve their poverty. Because when people buy things, they are invested in it, they're invested in maintaining it, they're invested in using it. And this whole notion of running business in a way that it can actually do good in the world, relieve poverty, cure illness, raise up self-sustaining enterprises in countries all over the world so that they can move from being a handout culture to a self-sustaining culture. This has been going on in the background for 35, 40 years. And there are now in the business schools of places like Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Wharton, we speak at a lot of these places every year. There are in the business schools graduate programs in MBAs for people who want to be social entrepreneurs. They believe in the innovative and competitive power of capitalism, but they want to use it to do good. And like the Corporate Business Roundtable, which has just decided that short-term profitability is not the road to real sufficiency and success, but instead caring for the well-being of your customers and clients, your suppliers, your employees, the communities in which you live. And then fifth on their list of priorities was long-term profitability for shareholders. Short-term profitability didn't even make their list in August of 2019. The social entrepreneurs have been on to this for 35 years, seeking to what they call the triple bottom line, which is people, profit, and then planet, defined as well-being for everybody involved. So that's been going on for some time, and our business is about the process, is about the business of helping these social entrepreneurs and helping large corporations that are now of this frame of mind learn how to sell in a way that is in alignment with those purposes.
But how do they do that and also cope with COVID-19 and extreme competition? Because every time you turn around, somebody else is trying to snatch your lunch, so to speak. It's like the sixth grade cafeteria almost.
Yeah, it is. Well, this is what transformation is about. Transformation is an entire paradigm shift to where you permanently think differently and act differently. And one of the things that Scott and I have brought to this discipline of learning how to transform selling is going back and going underneath the paradigm of selling to take a look at what most people think about it. And it has been fascinating to us, but what we've discovered is that almost without exception, and around the world, all the way from big commercial multinational operations and salespeople and sales forces, and we've worked with some of those companies, all the way down to the small social entrepreneurs in Africa, South America, Asia, selling door-to-door things like water filters, toilets, pit toilets. Everybody believes that selling is this mysterious dark art of talking people into buying stuff. Now, it was that discovery that allowed us to say, how are we going to transform that? Now, most people don't think they believe that, but if you scratch them deep enough, and if you look at how sales forces actually operate, especially when they're under pressure with COVID, with end of quarter targets to meet, with other companies trying to eat their lunch like a sixth grade cafeteria, when the pressure's on, you look at how people behave. And what you see is that they behave according to what they believe. And what they usually believe is selling is talking this buyer into signing the contract. Hence, you know, the old thing about that person is such a good salesman, they could sell refrigerators to Eskimos. And as an old sales guy, you know that. And my business partner has, you know, been a sales manager for 1,500 salespeople in his life, and very successful, retired, you know, in his early 40s. And that is actually not what great selling is, talking people into buying stuff. What is needed is a new context for it, a new understanding to transform it. And what we came up with is a concept called DQ, which stands for Decision Intelligence. Hence the name of our book. Hold up the book again, Roy, Commercial Decision Intelligence Selling. That book is about what we've discovered is a way to do selling that you can actually be proud of at the end of the day. That once you make commitment that all of your sales activity and your sales conversations are not going to pursue the purpose of getting that person to buy, but they're going to pursue the purpose of raising that person's DQ, raising their decision intelligence to the point where they can make the best possible decision for themselves and their business, even if it means they're saying no to what I'm selling today. If I can help them do that, that will establish such a relationship and make me stand out among all the other salespeople in the field that I will get referrals, repeat business, and ultimately be far more successful than I would have been selling in the old paradigm.
And people doing that hope that their competing salespeople don't buy your book.
Well, I'll tell you, I hope they all do. It'd be great to have us all competing in the right way. We just get better and better at it.
This has been riding beneath everybody's radar for all these years. What will bounce it onto people's radar? The average Joe down the street, the average politician, whether it's in Tallahassee or Sacramento or Washington?
Very good question. This is kind of the mystery of transformation. Transformation, this kind of change that sweeps over people, looks like it's instantaneous, but if you look at stuff, let's say equality of opportunity for men and women. If you look at women's right to vote, if you look at suffrage, if you look at women being treated equally with men, there's nobody today that would really argue that women shouldn't have the right to vote. But that was a huge argument for a long time in our history, and a lot of actual blood was shed over it. And the kind of dawning on the culture in general that women, of course, should vote because they're equal human beings with men, that dawning happened only because a relatively small group of people put the bit in their teeth and fought for it for decades. And they fought and they fought and they worked and they worked. And then when the transformation happened, it's like kind of overnight, everybody says, of course. Now that's the way transformation happens with large groups. And it kind of happens like that with individuals one at a time. The trick is you can accelerate the process if you know how to create the conditions for people to change the way they think and the way they behave. And that's the art and the science of transformation. And so that's the technology we've developed just to help people do that.
For our listeners who are saying, how am I going to integrate that into my company? It's going to require a massive rethink by everybody. What do you suggest? What steps should they be taking?
Great question. That is what, with every company that engages us in our services, we sit down with them and take a look at what they're already doing. Because the truth is that for somebody to be interested in this, they have to already have been intrigued by it. They have to already have been bitten by the bug. Does that make sense? It's like, that's why our entire marketing program for our company is we just try to uncover the linkages that already exist between us and people like yourself, like-minded people. We just keep looking for them and they show up. So to get back to the answer to your question, people who talk to us already have something that's intriguing them. And if we sit down and look with them at their company and how they're actually selling, we will see both green shoots of something new and a whole lot of garbage from the old stuff. And the way we do that with them is we apply a formula that my business partner, Scott Roy, developed years ago after taking the human development training that I had co-founded and applying it to his business, which he did like nobody I'd ever seen before do. It was amazing. He developed a formula called shorthand RACE, which stands for results, R equals A plus C plus E. Results, sales results, is a combination of a shift in attitude, competence, and execution, which is right effort, doing the right thing at the right time with the right people. And you can apply those three lenses. If I'm talking right to your listeners, which I guess I am, I would say take those three lenses. First, look at attitude. Look at how your people sell. What is their mindset? Both what do they think about selling? What do they think selling really is? What's their attitude when they're talking to their customers or clients? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to talk them into buying, or are they trying something else? And how relaxed are they? What's their own personal state of mind? How relaxed are they? How open are they? How well do they listen instead of just talk? You always know that somebody's in the old paradigm of selling when all they can do is drop back into pitching and persuading. So look for attitude. Where do you see attitude that really is flexible, relaxed, interested in the client, helping the client discover the problems they're trying to solve? Look for that. Secondly, look at competence. Look at their skills. How well do they really know how to listen? How to approach a client in a way that gets the client talking about the problems they have to solve, rather than asking you to present all your solutions, which is what clients always do, because clients have the same view of selling, which is you're here to pitch me, and my job is to put up with you until I either think you've got something or I can get rid of you. And in the meantime, I have to work to keep you away from the decision makers in the company in case you talk them into doing something stupid like believing all the stuff you're telling me. I mean, this is the whole game that goes on. It's like it's all out of the old paradigm. What is the skill level, the competence? Your listeners could look at their current sales staff and say, how skillful are they at avoiding pitching? Do they, for example, take a lot of time to prepare a value proposition before they go talk to their clients? Or what we do is teach people how to prepare a problem proposition, which is how do you present to your clients a range of problems that they might have and get them talking about the problems they have to solve. Because if a client's going to develop 100% decision intelligence, they have to first have 100% understanding of all the problems they're trying to solve and what it's costing them to leave them unsolved. That's halfway there. That's understanding the problem. Then they've got to understand clearly the solution that you're offering to their problems and how it'll actually solve it. And then doing a really thoughtful, conservative estimate of what's the financial value and the qualitative value of that solution for their business. If you can get a client to do all that, they will either know that you don't have what they need, or they are going to buy from you and often spend more money than they planned on, and be completely committed to the decision to buy and to use what you've got. So this is the way we sell our own services. And
how long does it take to train one of your clients in this whole different philosophy and get it to filter on down?
Yeah. It all depends how far along the transformational path they are. If you're dealing with a sales force and sales managers and a CEO who know they want to change the way they sell, and we have some clients who are that far along, it goes pretty quickly. Within 2, 3, 4 months, they are humming. If you're dealing, which is more often the case, with a mixture, you've got some really progressive thinking people who are onto this, but then you've got a lot of folks in there who are going, that sounds like a lot of California hooey to me, and what we need to do is just get out there and kind of get this down people's throats till they buy, and and on and on. That takes longer. I would say what we found with it's different too, and with social entrepreneurs, they are often far more willing to try something new because they've already given up on the way business is usually done. However, that doesn't mean they're home free because they still have in their heads the old paradigm of selling. And we've got to help them break that and get through that and adopt something else. That usually goes a little faster with more commercial companies. If they've got leadership that are really working, that helps. The way we go about it is, of course, you've got to start with the managers. And you've got to have a CEO or a head of a division, a director of sales, that has enough authority over their people to prevent the process getting contaminated from outside, from other parts of the business. And it takes leadership saying, we're going to commit to this. We're going to learn how to structure, how to transform the way we sell, and how to transform the people doing it, so that it takes a combination of in-person training, or in this day of COVID, we found a way to train remotely. Takes longer, and it's a little slower, but it can still be done and done well. So you've got a training period, which can be anywhere from an immediate training, which can be anywhere from 6 days to 5 or 6 weeks, whether it's done remotely or person to person. Then there's an embedding period of anywhere from 6 months to a year, where there's coaching of key people. There are remote workshops to refresh people on the skills. You've got to keep adjusting what you're doing to what happens on the ground, because you never know how transformation is going to work. where somebody's just going to dig in their heels and try to sabotage it, or where other people just catch fire and become champions and models for the company, and you need to adjust the program to take care of all that. So that's a very long answer. There's no cookie cutter answer. On average, I would say if you're going to go about this, you need to realize you're going to be in for a year or so, 18 months of solid work, at the end of which you are going to have a system where you no longer have to try to find great salespeople. Instead, you recruit great learners because you have a system to teach them. And you have a management structure that can create the conditions in their day-to-day management that people keep living in a way that is changed about how they sell. You'll have that, and it actually generates more profit than you had before. Greater sales, sales that happen more quickly, and for larger amounts.
Roy, I would think all of our listeners and viewers probably have an idea right now that you're a pretty optimistic fellow. How do you see this impacting our society in this country over the next 5 years, 10 years, and even further down the road? What difference, if we were to get into our little time machine and fire it up and go into the future, what would we see?
Well, that's very interesting. You call me optimistic. I am really optimistic if people do this work. If they don't do the work, I'm pessimistic, because the real problem of transformation, and this we've learned, I mean, transformation is an old subject. This is what the Buddha was doing in 485 BC, all the way up to neuroscience and neuroplasticity and the study of how people learn and when their brains start learning less. So I'm going to give about 2 minutes on this to explain my pessimism. The problem basically is that by the time an adult is in their early 20s, they're pretty much living on autopilot. They have moments of kind of waking up and being fully present and glad to be alive and seeing the possibilities in things. But a lot of the time they live their life both at work and at home, in an advanced state of automaticity. And that automaticity actually starts at about age 5. Now, this is what neuroscience has just in the last 15, 20 years has shown us. But first of all, when I was doing my doctorate, 2001 to 4, what I noticed was that the greatest learning period of our life is arguably 0 to 5 years of age. It's when children learn to, if they're raised in a home with multiple languages, they will learn multiple languages. Our director of marketing, who's Italian, lives in Paris, married to a Parisian. They've got 3 children. They all speak 3 or 4 languages. They're young. Children learn art, they learn music, they learn sport. They'll go after anything. And they change week by week by week. It's the magic of having small children or grandchildren we've got 4 grandchildren, and to watch them go through this is magical. You watch them just change like that. Now, starting about age 5, what you notice is that your children who used to be willing to do anything will all of a sudden one day you'll say, draw me a picture of that. And they've been drawing things and you've been hanging it on the fridge for 4 or 5 years. All of a sudden they say things like, I can't draw. I can't play piano. I'm no good at soccer. I'll never be good at this. I can't do that. And what has happened that neuroscience tells us, what has happened is that right up in the frontal lobe of the brain, there develops, and this is part of the tragedy and part of my pessimism if people don't deal with this, part of the tragedy of being a human being and what philosophers, religious people, psychologists have called the human condition, is that starting about age 5, right up in front of the human brain, develops a self-reflective capacity of the brain where the brain starts talking to itself. And it takes whatever happens, like a child's in kindergarten and they're happily drawing their stick figures and colors all over the desk and the paper, and they look over and next to them, their little 5-year-old colleague has painted the Mona Lisa. And a teacher comes by and goes, "Oh, Billy," speaking to the other colleague, "you're an artist," and little Roy looks up and hoping that the teacher will say the same thing they just said to Billy or Jane or whoever. And they look at Roy and they look at the stick figures and the teacher goes, "Very nice." And that was okay for Roy a month earlier. But on this day, his little developing brain says, Billy or Jane is an artist. I'm not. And what neuroscience has showed us is that when that star of the brain starts cooking, starts developing, it does 3 things to us from the rest of our lives. It takes whatever happens to us and it immediately draws conclusions about it, whether it should have happened or not, who's right and who's wrong, who's to blame, what does it mean? It just fills all that information in at lightning speed. And then it tells us how we have to behave. You've got to be tough. You've got to just take it. You've got to roll over. You've got to stand up for yourself. You've got to be quiet. You've got to be talkative. It starts developing our personality. And then to lock those demands in place, it accompanies all that with predictions about what's going to happen in the future to you if you don't do what it's telling you to do, based on the conclusions that it just drew. Now, that's a simplified version of what goes on with what in our former program we used to call mind talk. But this chatter in the brain that everybody hears, everybody knows it now, they can hear it. But that starts at about age 5. And by the time we're 22 or so, that is locked in and baked in so that we don't even question it anymore. We don't even know it's operating. So that when people are selling, for example, and a client says, "Well, I don't know, let me think about it," they go on automatic. They get frightened. Their brain says, "I'm losing the sale. I've got to push. I've got to convince them. And if I don't, then I'm not going to make my target. If I don't make my target, I won't get my bonus. If I don't get my bonus, I'm not going to go on holiday with the family." And they click into their automatic behavior. Now, people have got to become aware of that and learn how to create the conditions to handle it. And that's all handleable. There's a science to it. You can learn. You don't have to be a victim of that, but it takes learning. If people are already kind of on to that, they can get at it pretty quickly about how to manage that. If they're not onto it, it takes some awakening, and then they can learn how to do it. But that's all of that has to be addressed.
And I made the mistake of saying that you were an optimist.
Well, it's like if people don't address that, I'm not optimistic for them. Bless their hearts. But I mean, eventually, when the cultural change happens and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, women are equal," they will be one of the ones going, "Oh yeah, I've known that all along," when for 30, 40 years, they never even suspected it. Or they agreed with it intellectually, but not in their daily life. So they'll come along, but where I get optimistic is if people will do this work, they can get it, and that accelerates the pace of their individual transformation and transformation of our businesses and of our culture. And that is what I see more and more happening. That gives me great optimism, but it involves people doing the work.
Let's give our listeners and viewers an idea of where they can get more information from you.
Website, of course. The company is called Whitten and Roy Partnership. The website is wrpartnership.com. So www.wrpartnership.com. And it's all there. And If they want to go to the book tab and to book resources, there's a download they can get on the technique that is central to all of our work called split attention, which when I was doing my doctoral work, when I looked at the 0 to 5-year-olds and how free they were, what got very clear to me, and I'm not the first one to discover this. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. But what I saw from my own observation and in my reading of people that have been after this for ages, and what the Buddha saw 500 BC, was that from 0 to 5, what makes children so neuroplastic, makes them so able to transform and change, is a combination of two things. Present moment awareness, that is, they're in the present moment. You never see a 3-year-old sitting in their room feeling guilty, being depressed, not unless they're being abused. Normal 3-year-olds, if they have a meltdown, they have a meltdown, and 5 minutes later, they're fine again. Their parents are depressed, but they're not. So it's present moment awareness. And the other thing is, interestingly enough, what we call deep desire. They know what they want, and they want it. And we have built a technology around how you create those two conditions in yourself while you're working. While you're at home with your family, how do you create present moment awareness without having to go away and meditate for 30, 40 minutes? How to do it while you're still there, and then how to tap into what you most deeply want in your heart of hearts. You start doing those two things at the same time, becoming fully present, knowing what you really want, and that is what unlocks the brain to rewire itself, which is what happens neurologically, this rewiring of the synapses of the 85 billion neurons in the brain. That rewiring is the physical analog of what we call transformation. It's what allows you to think differently and behave differently, and you can actually take charge of that process. Very exciting stuff.
You've been watching the Bizgnus podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@bizgnus.com. Thanks for watching.